Do you ever feel like your budget and your ambitions don't match up? You have big ideas, exciting initiatives, programming, and strategies that could take member engagement to the next level. But then reality hits, limited staff, tight budgets, and never-ending demand for more, and more. Let's be honest, when resources are tight and expectations are high, you can't afford to create content that only works once. Good news, you don't have to. Let's talk about how to make content work harder for you. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Association Amplified podcast. Today we're tackling a huge opportunity for associations, getting more bang for your content buck. Whether you're working with a tight budget or just want to stretch your content further, today's conversation is all about how to repurpose, redistribute, and amplify what you already have without increasing your spend. All right, we're back on the podcast with Christy Devanche. Christy, thanks for joining us again.
No problem, Marcus. Happy to be here.
So association teams, often very small, very nimble, and they're really forced to push out a lot of content for their members as they're trying to, in some cases, serve an entire industry. And that could be really challenging for associations. And, often the topic of repurposing, say, journals or magazine content, or say even pieces from their conference comes up. And often what I run into is that associations often feel like they're shooting in the dark in terms of what's going to stick, what's going to land, because they are trying to repurpose those elements. And often that ends up being for budgetary constraints, right? Where opposed to investing in original programming can be something that associations aren't necessarily ready to incorporate into their budgets. So I was curious, Christy, about where have you seen associations struggle the most when it comes to their content and the budgetary question?
I think associations really struggle to, I think as you touched on, they have these big ideas about what they have to do. We got to start from scratch, build something huge. We need this high production value thing in order to make an impact, instead of looking at all the things they're already doing, looking at all the resources they already have. Everything they're already producing can probably be repackaged or represented in a way that's going to make it easier for their membership to access it or to consume it. Or if they're presenting in a different format, it might be a way that's more appealing for a certain member to grab onto and learn from, which is really, I think, what they're trying to work towards with producing content, is putting out relevant information for their members to have. And they're already doing that. They're already making stuff. And I think when they're thinking about content or content strategy, concentrating on the resources they already have or the information they already have at their fingertips when they're starting with their strategy is really important. And it's great to think big, but it's not always sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we think about the year and what we're going to be offering to members, you really have to take into consideration, well, not only what do we want to do, what do we think members are looking for, what have members been telling us, what's been popular at the conference, what do we want to make more available that's been from the conference, which is something I'm seeing more and more, which is absolutely relevant. But there is those budgetary constraints that can creep up, right? So my question to you is, what's your recommendations when it comes to actually navigating, say, your content strategy for the year versus those fixed budgets that associations are trying to be responsible with?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you always need to start with what the goal is. So what are you trying to achieve by producing this content? And then that's really going to help you understand what you already have that could help you achieve the goal. So, for example, if the goal is really to drive attendance at your event, and that's what you're trying to facilitate out of producing some content, if you, say, had a photographer or had a videographer at your last event, you're already sitting on a whole pile of footage or photography from that. Can that be put together into an asset that's going to help promote next year's event? And you don't have to come up with a whole bunch of extra budget because you can use some of the material you already have on hand.
Yeah, I've actually think of two recent conversations that I've been having with associations where both of them are looking to take something that's seen as like a huge driver at their annual conference and just realizing that their industry is really craving that knowledge that's being shared. It's very niche, very academic material that the industry is just hungry to absorb from some very respected speakers. So they've realized, how can we make this more accessible? And is this actually something that we can use as partly as a recruitment tool, as people that aren't members yet are going to be hungry for this? And that's a way to kind of connect the dots between us and them. And also that it's be a solid tool for generating non-dues revenue, right? So on that note, what are some things that you've seen that are great strategies in terms of getting the most bang for your buck, if you will, when say an association executive is trying to think about maximizing their dollars? How can they go about, say, cutting costs when still delivering something that's going to be of value to the member or perhaps serve a goal that the association has?
One of the first places I always encourage associations to look is at their own membership. There are often a lot of experts, a lot of people who would be excited to share their knowledge, share their expertise, share ideas for other members. And there are so many different ways to do a great self-recording or a really low-cost way to gather up your members' insights in a way that can be shared out and people can have a really great experience learning from their peer. And, everybody's got a pretty good quality video camera in their pocket now. And I'm not suggesting that people stand there like this and record themselves. You want to do it right. And just a few small tweaks in the way somebody sets up their phone to record themselves can make a huge difference in the quality of the content or the quality of the recording. But at the end of the day, if you are starting from the place of getting a really valuable insight from your members, something people really want to know and understand, that's great content, and it doesn't have to be expensive to produce. So making sure you're really in touch with your membership. Who are those people who want to contribute? Who are those people who have great insights and ideas? And how are you working with them? How are you coaching them in order to pull that information out of them in a way that's going to be great for other members to access and learn from?
We had Brianna Pirelli on recently, and something that we spoke about at length is using the framework Inform, Educate, Inspire for how to think about splitting up your budget, right? To summarize it for people is like, if the content that you need to deliver to folks is that very utilitarian, knowledge-based, it doesn't need to be a Hollywood blockbuster, You really just want to, yes, check the box on, is this professional? And I would say, is it concise, right? Is the person is engaging with the content? Are they getting value out of it right away? That's the whole hook, right? People are there to acquire some knowledge, to engage with something that's of interest to them. And the best thing you can do is just get right to it and deliver it. And it doesn't need to have an extraordinary budget to do it, especially with all the technology at our fingerprints and just how accessible production value has gotten. The cost has just dropped over the last 2 decades to produce something that is absolutely accessible. And on more of a cultural front, we're all really being trained every day to consume things that we're engaged in with things that are often very scrappy, made by individuals, subject matter experts. You'll have very successful leaders in industry, they'll be making content. I think there's more CEOs out there making content now in 2025 than, ever, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you had that piece of recorded content, one of your members shared a video with you and they had this golden sparkling insight, do you have a writer in-house who can turn that into an article? Can it go on your blog? Can it be posted somewhere else or in a different format for people to consume? And I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind is that if you have one piece of really great content, it can often be reformatted or repurposed in a couple of different ways that might help you actually serve a different set of members who prefer to read or prefer to listen over watching the video.
It's never been easier to hit on different formats, right? So say you have someone that's a rock star member of your association, they're a brilliant academic and they're doing some study that's of huge relevance, if you're able to capture that, right, even remotely with the person, it's not much of a lift to actually translate that into an article, which then starts perhaps with your newsletter. So now that you have this whole pipeline where people can learn about it, say from a push, which is a newsletter, they could land on a page and end up with a nice firsthand rendering of them delivering, say, their findings in this case. And for those that prefer to read, that's available to them as well. So they're in just one opportunity, you've created multiple ways for people to consume something that's important to them, which is just so relevant these days as information is just so readily available. The association really has an opportunity to take advantage of the times we're in and to really step up and be that arbiter and authority in their space, because information is only going to become more and more available. But the wants of people are really shifting from, can I get knowledge, to who should I listen to? The accessibility piece of delivering it into multiple formats is a great way to make sure that you're delivering it in a way where it's really suiting people's preferences.
Right. So maybe your member came on, they talked for half an hour, and they hit on two starkly different topics. Maybe it makes sense to split that into two different pieces of content and to push it out to two separate segments of your audience who are going to find the most value from it. And I think getting the most out of your budget, getting most out of your content, part of that is just thinking and being really thoughtful when you take that piece of content. Who needs this information? How can I package it up for them? How do I make sure that it lands in their hands in a way that's going to bring them the most value?
So touching back on something that we mentioned earlier was just this really the cost associated with, having and producing a content strategy, right? So when you step back and you look at your programming for the year, you're really checking the box on all these kind of different channels that you can engage with your members. Ultimately, this ladders up to a monetary value as well as just the internal resources that your team needs to invest to be able to deliver all of this. So when it comes to the funding mechanism for all of this, I mean, obviously, number one is that the dues is going to support some of this. And then we have non-dues, which can historically be a big opportunity for non-dues revenue, is the annual conference. For some sectors, the conference ends up being just an overwhelming powerhouse when it comes to generating the funding required to fuel the association. What are your thoughts when it comes to the sponsorship model as it goes to developing and delivering that content?
I think this is such a huge area of opportunity that a lot of associations aren't tapping into as much as they should. On one hand, you have your sponsors. They have resources, they have knowledge, they have expertise, and they want access to your membership. That's their target audience. Mm-hmm. And then on the other side, you have your members. And often they are hungry for the knowledge, for the expertise, for the information that your sponsors have. So you, as the association, have this incredible opportunity to bring those two things together in a way that benefits you at the association at the same time. What does this actually look like? My absolute favorite example of this was when we worked with an association called CSCMP, and they had a sponsor who made a video about drones in the digital yard. And they talked about how it can really enhance the operations at different businesses to use drones in like truck and shipping yards. And it was a really cool video. The sponsor paid for it. They paid to be interviewed and to have the video put out in front of their audience. It was the top performing video that the association released the entire year. It got thousands of views. This was 4 or 5 years ago, and you can still find this video. It's still being used, it's still being watched, and it was a win for everybody. Clearly, they hit on something that their membership wanted to learn about, and it was a huge benefit to their sponsor. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for associations to make content like this, where their members are benefiting from the knowledge that their sponsors have, and their sponsors are benefiting from the access to the members.
Yeah, I feel like there are associations out there that are getting that. The cleanest way to think about it is like in those categories of technology, right? Like, so say in your industry, it's very technology driven. Your membership base is looking to keep up with developments. It's no mistake to anyone that technology is this avalanche, right, of change. So regardless if you participate in facilitating that, they're going to be looking to acquire that knowledge. And if you're not providing it, who will? Right? So it's like, that's a real stark thing to think about. But I think it's really important is that if you're not facilitating that, people will find their answers elsewhere because that's where their interests are. So I think that's a pretty clean way of thinking about it. Obviously, there's considerations when it comes to working with sponsors on projects such as that, and those things are important. There are examples where members are looking for information, and everyone could understand that this is a company speaking about what they specialize in.
Yes. Entirely. You can have a software company that is incredibly well-versed in certain types of legislation that relate to the software they produce. They can make an incredible educational video for your membership about the legislation. Even if it has nothing to do with their software, they might jump at this opportunity to get in front of your audience and educate them. And your membership might be thrilled to learn about the most up-to-date, most relevant information to them about changes happening in their industry. And I think this is really a huge role that the association has, is making it easy for their members to get access to these experts. And this is a situation where it's a win for the sponsor and a win for the association too. The association needs that budget, they need the funding, they need the money to make the video or the article or the podcast, whatever the format that content is taking. And here's a sponsor willing to pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've given this an example before, but I'll give it again here, is that you're already doing this with your conference, right? You couldn't do it without all these different ways of funding the conference. You couldn't put on a stellar event. So we've already accepted that sponsorship is part of it, but everyone is comfortable with that because it's all very clear and open. Here's Fred's company. They're in the exhibit hall. They want to talk about their solution. And guess what? People go to the exhibit hall because they're looking for solutions, right? So within that context, it makes perfect sense. But the fact that there still are folks that are resisting to translate some of that experience between the speaking hall and the exhibitor floor onto their website so it's really accessible, why would we want to restrict and limit how people can engage with us and get the things that they're looking for? Conferences are extremely important for a multitude of ways, but what is like the conversation that never goes away in the association space? How do we engage with members? Well, if we're putting caps on how people can get what we can provide for them, well, it's right underneath our feet, right? So we just need to apply that same philosophy that made us put on and do the things that we do in the conference and start thinking about how can we make that more available? How can we make it more available? Well, we put it online, and we should probably put it online where we live online, which is our website, which is our home, our front door, opposed to spreading it out. But that's a conversation for another day. So there's a lot that can be delivered from seeing sponsors not only as ways of generating cash for your association, but like these are people that are dedicating their professional lives to something that is relevant to your audience. It's up to you to be able to be the arbiter of, is this relevant to my membership? And if it is, they can be a great partner to be that subject matter expert, right? So we just need to remind ourselves, like, is this a topic that is relevant, especially like this year, perhaps? Well, if the sponsor can say, I can talk about X, Y, and Z about that topic, then you're really looking at something that can facilitate content that is useful for folks. And again, it's paying for itself, or depending on your ability to position it with that sponsor and the price point you could command, you can, actually generate revenue off of it, which like really flips how we think about how do we fund our programming and the content that we're producing over the year.
Yeah, definitely. And you've touched a couple times on events and how important events are, but they're just a day or 2 days. They're this big kind of flash in the pan, and sponsors need more than that. And by thinking about how they can be involved in content beyond your event, beyond that time they appeared on this stage, you're giving them more and you're giving your members more, which is what everybody wants out of this kind of a relationship.
Well, if we take a step back and we think about what we covered, what do you think should be the real takeaways that people get out of this conversation?
I think that when you're feeling that pressure of, I don't have the budget that I need to do all the things I want to do or to communicate all the things I feel I need to communicate to my membership, the first thing you're going to want to do is look at what you already have. What are you already doing? Is there a way that you can repurpose that, reformat that, cut it up a different way so it's better segmented to your audience? There are lots of different ways you can go about it, but you're probably already sitting on a lot of information that can be used for great content for your members. And think about all the channels that can go out in as well. Make sure that you don't just stop at using your video. If that can also be repurposed into an article or a piece of audio content that your membership can consume, make sure you're considering that as well. Finally, one of the biggest untapped opportunities you might be sitting on is the opportunity to have partnerships. Sponsors might have great information that your audience wants, that your membership needs, and looking at how they can participate in your content, how they can help fund your content is something really important that I think all associations should be taking a really careful look at right now.
Chrissy, I think those are some really awesome points for people to keep in mind. And once again, thank you for being on the podcast.
It's no problem at all.
Thanks for spending time with us on Association Amplified. Until next time, take care and keep inspiring your members.